Hello and welcome back, everybody. Wow, that caught me off guard. Did that count down to one or?
I think we went. I think it's jumped over one. We're eager to get rolling here.
Super pumped to be here today. Yeah, it's as excited as I am. The intro's excited as I am to get to this today. We have a great guest to get to. Ryan Carr from episode 29 is back. Before we talk to him, though, we just have a couple of things to go over. Everyone listening should go over to our website, breakthrough.reipodcast.ca. There they can download every single episode that we've ever done. They can go back and actually, I believe they can go on the chat board, interact with the guests, ask questions, and they can also get our free gift.
Yeah, the ultimate strategy for building wealth through real estate. Free report there they can pick up, and that'll get you on our email list too to ensure that you never miss out on an episode and you get notified when our new stuff comes out, as well as our events, property tours, whatever else we got going on. You'll hear about it all if you just sign up there, and that way you won't miss out.
I am super pumped to get back to some in-person property tours. I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but hopefully it happens really soon. I sort of see the horizon, but we, still got to wait and see what happens here. But that being said, you can join our virtual tours and you will get the info for each and every one that we do if you sign up for our list, and you won't miss out. Also, please go over to iTunes and like and subscribe and all that kind of stuff. We're on YouTube right now live. If anyone's watching that way, you can go in the chat room and ask questions. I'm sure you're going to have lots of questions for Ryan. He's a super interesting guy, got a lot going on, a lot of knowledge. And so here's your free ticket to ask Ryan anything you want. Get on there, get on the comment board and just ask away. Ryan will be happy to answer.
He will.
He will. What else we got to get into here? Should we get right into the interview or any other housekeeping pieces?
Well, I guess just real quick, if you haven't left a review on iTunes, so please do that. It helps out a lot. It helps us get guests like Ryan to come on the show. So please, everybody that hasn't done that, get over there. And it only takes a couple minutes. Just tell us what you think, good or bad, and we will be more than happy to read your comments and hopefully get some info from different places in the country that people have been asking for over, the last little while, and some of the insights from people who are doing the things that people have asked for more info on. So it always does help us. It helps us steer the show in the right direction. So yeah, please go over there and leave us your comments on iTunes. And I guess that's about it.
Awesome. Well, super pumped to get Ryan here on the show. Before we do that, let's just have a quick little break with our sponsor here before we get Ryan on.
Hey guys, Omar Khan here with Data Trading Co. I wanted to tell you about episode 124 of the Breakthrough Podcast. We currently have a special offer for Breakthrough Podcast listeners. We're offering a free 1-hour live training session where we show how to instantly add stock options as a new income stream. Now, I've used this myself personally over the years to create a sizable real estate portfolio for myself, and there's no reason you can't as well. The cool thing is it only takes about 30 minutes a day, so if you have a job, or if you have a business, or you're just spending a lot of time with your family, you're gonna have time to incorporate this in your life if you take the time to learn this, okay? Now, we're also offering a 15-minute free consultation to discuss how our option strategy can work with your current investment strategy and really take your investment to the next level, okay? So for more information, check out 30minutestocktrader.com/breakthrough to join us on our free live training, our next webinar. Remember again, episode 124, where Sandy and I go over exactly how I use this strategy to acquire a large real estate portfolio for myself, and there's no reason why you can't as well. See you there, guys. Talk soon.
All right, awesome. Well, let's bring in Ryan here then. Welcome officially, I guess, to the show here, Ryan. Welcome back to the show, I should say. 5 years in the making here.
Thanks for having me on. This is great.
Well, like I mentioned before, Ryan was our guest on episode 29, which was 5 years ago, believe it or not. It doesn't seem like that long ago, but I guess it flies when you're having fun. So, but for the newer listeners, maybe who haven't gone back that far or aren't familiar with last time you were on, let's talk about how you got started in real estate investing.
Yeah, gosh, I got started in real estate investing in 2012. I started doing it full time in 2014. The first property that we had ever bought, my wife and I, was a single family home, bank sale, fixer upper. Graduated to a first rental property, which at that time was a basement apartment. And then since then, it's just been a real busy time. We've purchased over 50 properties, or purchased or controlled over 50. Since then, I think we're up to like 52 or 53, and lots of flips, infill development, basement apartments, low-rise apartment building construction, all that good stuff. So it's been a real busy last couple of years.
I like how you just glaze over that, like it's, like it's nothing.
Hey, yeah, I don't know what to say. It's fun.
All right. Well, I think last time we spoke with you, you were sort of into the duplex conversions. We talked, I think, a lot about your front and back split of
vertical splits, right?
splits of the duplexes. So you were doing that, a lot of that, but now you've sort of maybe not shifted gears, but expanded, I guess, quite significantly. Ryan, we don't want to glaze over it like that.
Yes.
About what you've sort of done since last time you were on the show to where you are now. And you don't have to race through it. This is some really interesting stuff. So let's take some time and dive deep into it.
All right, we'll go into the nitty gritty. So from, we'll say 2014 till now, we can talk about the team. So I've grown a team. I operate with full-time staff, T4 payroll employees. A lot of people are very interested in that and how that functions. So, I've done a little bit of that. I've grown the team. I typically operate with 2 to 3 crews on our open job sites. And at any one time, I have between 8 and sometimes up to 15 open job sites in various phases of development. So what that meant, back when I first got started, was like one duplex doing it myself. And what that means now that I have full-time staff, is that with the infill development wing of the business, we're looking at building new properties, building new homes, low-rise apartment buildings, things like that. With the flipping side of things, that kind of comes into 2 buckets, which is wholesaling and actual physical construction. And then, of course, we got some of the other buy and holds and duplex conversions and stuff like that, which we've been taking on. And those are great. But, like a lot of investors, when you have too many properties, the bank says no. So you got to change your strategies as you navigate that as well. And that's what I've been doing.
And you mentioned an interesting term there, infill. Do you want to maybe expand on what that is?
Yeah. So infill development would be taking a house that's typically existing or severing off a piece of land, taking that house down and building a new house in its place. In my case, I like to buy corner lots. I like to buy wide lots. We just did a couple in the Durham region recently that were really successful. And I love to be able to find that opportunity and find dirt where dirt was no longer or typically unavailable for most people, and build something on that dirt that can generate you income. And in my case, long term, I like to keep whatever I can. So building apartment buildings on that dirt is better. Building duplexes is great, and wherever we can find those opportunities is what I take it up on.
And so you've done a lot of different types of deals over the years, obviously different types of strategies. And your I guess your focus has changed a little bit as you've gone with that. How have you kind of decided to do that, or how have you decided to take different directions at different points? Because you were doing a lot of the duplex stuff. Now you're kind of doing a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm an opportunity guy. I realized over these last 50 some odd deals that like opportunity comes in different forms. And if you're flexible and ambidextrous to that, you can capitalize on those opportunities. And I find that over the years, I've noticed that a lot of people say there's no deals out there. I can't find any deals. And when you can be flexible and adapt to those deals as they come about, you can make money, or you can grow the business, or you can add rentals to your portfolio, or whatever your goals are, you can definitely achieve that. And I've been very good at coordinating those deals and navigating it so that there is a plethora of deals out there. And when you have full-time staff, you have to keep them busy. And you need to be able to find opportunity where there may not have been opportunity previous.
So I guess let's expand on that a little bit. So what you're more or less referring to is figuring out what the highest and best use for a property is. And the key, I guess, to it being a deal, quote unquote, is identifying that what it's being used for now is not its highest and best use, and sort of changing the use of that land, expanding on what you were talking about before with your dirt, what's on that dirt. But what the land is being used for is not necessarily what it's best used for, or what the opportunity or the zoning or whatever allows it to be used for. So you'll dig into that and figure out that, hey, instead of it being a single family home, we can actually put like a low rise apartment building or something like that on the land instead. So let's walk through the process a little bit of how you would, I guess, identify one of these pieces of property.
For sure. So there's three ways that I look at deals in any form when they come in. So just going down the infill development program, if I look at a potential lot for new construction or infill development, I'll look at it in three ways. So I'll say, what's the highest and best use of the land? What's the highest and best use of the structure, existing or new? And what is the highest and best use of your own personal skill sets and time? And when I look at these three things, right, we can really drill down on, okay, does the dirt make sense? Does the house that's here make sense? Or do we have to take it down and start again? And what am I actually good at? Like, do I have financing? Do I have the skills to pull this project off, whatever that project may be? You gotta boil all of that in. And when you can look at all of those things, right, that's going to identify a deal. And what I've realized over the last little while as well is that the same deal, like, take a cookie cutter deal. For one person, that deal may look one way, and for another person, it may look completely different. And like, for example, if you're an infill development guy, you're probably going to take the house down and build a new one. If you're a wholesaler, you might say, I don't want anything to do with that infill development permit phase. I'm not interested. I'm just going to sell it off. If you're an agent, like you guys, maybe you're best to collect the commission on that and transact the paper. Like, there's so many different ways that you can look at the same property, and I've been good at identifying that.
And not only that, it might be, well, the best and highest use is building some kind of industrial building on there, where that might not be your skill set. Your skill set might be, well, we can't put an apartment building there, but we can put a house or whatever it is, like, right? So that one might come into play as well, I guess, is like you mentioned there, the best use of your time. So if you got to learn how to do something over again, or learn how to do something like let's say you haven't, Ryan, built an apartment building, like there was a time where you didn't know what was involved in that kind of thing. So for the average person listening to this today, it might be, yeah, you can put a 6-unit apartment building on that building, but am I ready to tackle all of that? Or what is the best use of my time? So that's interesting too. I never really thought of that. It's not necessarily, go to the 100% max of what you can do. You have to use your skill sets as well in order to make the project come to life.
Yeah, for sure. It's some creativity. It's some strategy. I mean, you talked about putting up a commercial complex. There's value in land assemblies too. So if you take, if you buy a corner lot and then you add 1 or 2 lots around that periphery, what would maybe be a $500,000 house times 3, because you have 3 lots now totaling 1.5 million. Because you have all 3 of those lots, maybe that land is actually worth 5 million now, because you have the density and you're on an arterial road and you've got the space that you can build a great big tower. So it's not always about what it is. It's definitely about what it can be.
So how do you, I think we should get into kind of evaluating some deals, but before we do that, how do you actually find these deals? I think part of it is in actually identifying it in the first place, right? But how do you come across these? How do you come across deals? How do you find real estate deals that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a 50-50 guy. So I buy half off market and half on the MLS. I'm a big believer in supporting my realtors. I'm a big believer in finding off market properties. And I think that there's a balance. What I love about the MLS is that if you know what to look for, like oftentimes you can find maybe a misrepresented property, for example. So somebody hasn't done their due diligence. They're listing that property too low. Maybe it's got some zoning opportunities that the agent or the seller didn't even know about, right? That happens often. So I'm buying those on the MLS. In terms of being on the private side, yellow letter campaigns, door knocking, moving into a neighborhood, buying one deal, and then buying a few deals using that first one as leverage. is a really good way to do it. I've done that lots. I spent the first couple of years of my career down in the south end of Oshawa, just scooping up 5, 6, 7, 8 properties on this one street. I just never left, right? Like I would buy one, and then I would talk to the neighbor, and then I'd buy the neighbor's house and just keep going. You know, it was great. It was really efficient for the guys and the staff, and that was cool. So, you know, those are some different ways that I'm doing it, and some different ways that I'm growing the portfolio. And when those properties come up, you got to be ready. Like you got to be able to scoop them up. You got to have your financing in line, and finding those properties is key.
Ryan, you got a lot of attention a little while ago for a tiny house that you did in Oshawa as well, and that is actually a really good example of what we're talking about today, because it was sort of part of, well, maybe you're best to describe it, but you took that land and really did highest and best use on that. So, did you want to maybe tell people about that for those who didn't follow this story?
Yeah, I can break it down. So that was a property that, again, I bought in the MLS. It was an open market transaction. Anybody could have had it. What it was there was a little like 253 square foot house on one side, and then there was a normal, 2-bed, 1-bath kind of thing on the other side of this parcel. And when I saw it come through my inbox, I noticed that it had 2 municipal addresses. Very common in the duplex space, not the second unit space, but the actual duplex space where one building has 2 units and it actually has 2 municipal addresses. I was able to read the legal description in the MLS listing and come to know that both of these addresses were actually on their whole lot, or each on their own lot within a plan of subdivision. And for anybody listening, what that means is you can go and sever that land on those 2 municipal addresses as of right on closing without having to go through a traditional land severance, which is, thousands of dollars in studies and months of time and all this. So I was able to put that tiny house back on its own lot, even though the lots had previously merged and the seller was selling it as one. That's how that one worked.
And then talk a little bit about what you did with the 2 lots then, because now once they're severed, you were left with, and I want to talk about that house too, because that was really interesting what you did with it, but
Sure.
it was essentially a shack on one side, on one property, and a house on the other side. So talk about those 2 properties individually and what you did with them.
Yeah, so they both ended up being flips. What we did was, after we parted the lots, then we had 2 titles again, and we could convey them separately without a merger. The first house we fixed up. We did the typical cosmetic renovation, sold that one off, right? That was just your typical make it pretty and turn it over to the market again. That's how that one went. The tiny house, on the other hand, was something that I thought there was a bit of money in it, right? Which there was. We made a few bucks. We didn't hit the grand slam or anything, but there's a few bucks there. And I just thought it was just a really neat project. I thought the guys would appreciate it. I had a ton of fun doing it. We had a bunch of marketing surrounding that as well. And the house itself was actually, like I say, 253 square feet or something. And it was built back in the 40s. We believe that it was in around World War II. We'd found some newspapers in the floorboards dating back to, I think it was 43. And I framed it. When we found it, I framed that newspaper and I gave it to the new owner. And we had decorated the house back up and made it pretty again. And it was just one of those projects that you just don't see very often. And there's such a big following with the tiny house community. That I wasn't even part of the tiny house community formally prior to this. I just thought, hey, this is cool, let's do it. And we did this project and it caught a lot of steam. And God, I think it had like 100,000 hits on Facebook, and we were on 5 newspaper platforms, and all of the decor and stuff turned out really awesome too. So that was a ton of fun. That was really cool.
And there's like, we'll move off in a bit. I find it fascinating too, because was actually, I went through the house when you were done it, and it works really well for a house that's small. Everything was in its place, everything flowed. There seemed like there was enough room to actually live there once you got inside. So there's got to be a lot of design that goes into something like that as well, right, to make it work. Yeah,
there is. So I mean, just for example, you've got to look at things like laundry. You got to look at things like a heat source, and you got to look at things that do dual function, dual purpose. So like we had a countertop with a cutout underneath it that had a stool. The stool swung out, and that became the breakfast bar because there's no room for a formal dining room table. We had a washing machine that actually doubled as a dryer. So it was dual purpose as well because you lost one appliance, right? We had in-wall heaters that were forced air, and they blew the hot air around the unit because there's no room for a traditional furnace in that sense. So you had to really think like almost like an RV designer, like a Winnebago designer. How can we tuck in all these really neat features for somebody to live here with the modern day conveniences?
All right, so we can move off that now, but anyone who's interested, I mean, like you said, it's on Facebook, right? Like people can go look that up, get a little tour of the place, I believe.
It's up there.
Okay. Ryan, you're writing a book, swinging back around to, or you've written a book.
Yeah.
Going back around to highest and best use. Tell us about your book.
Yeah, so the book is something that I've wanted to do for a long time. I took all those last 50 some odd deals, reevaluated and said, okay, what am I good at here? How can I crunch this down and distill it to give somebody within a couple hundred pages all of the information that I would typically tell them, how to go out and do deals like I do. So I'm crunching that down into a book. It's coming out spring market 2021. And again, it's all about finding highest and best use of property. And those three ways that I described of finding the best use of the property, the structure, or your skill sets and time.
And they can find that, our listeners can find that at highestandbestuse.com, thehighestandbestuse.com.
That's right, thehighestandbestuse.com. Yeah, you can sign up. There's a link there. You can sign up. And like I said, it's coming out spring market 2021. So when it goes to print and Audible and all that stuff, people can look out for it then.
What keeps you going here? What keeps you motivated, inspired to keep doing all this cool, kind of interesting construction and conversions, all this stuff?
It's the creativity, 100%. There's three sort of pillars that I live by, and that's charismatic, thoughtful, and creative. And the creative aspect of this is what really fuels me. I really love to take a deal. Like we'll go for a drive. My wife and I will go for a drive, and we'll go through like a crappy subdivision or down a major route or somewhere around the country. And we'll just be like, oh man, what would we do with that place? And what would we do with that place? And it's so much fun to just say, okay, how can we create something of value or something that's beautiful, or maybe repurpose the land, stuff like this. That's what really gets me going. It used to be the construction. I used to get really fueled by the construction because I'm a really hands-on guy. That's still there, but more in the design aspect now. And now I just like to find the best use of land, and that's what just fires me up. I love it. I genuinely love it.
Awesome. So obviously, and that's shifted over time as you've grown and done some different things. Obviously, the different excitement levels tend to change too. I find that too. You kind of get excited about little things at times, and then you start doing some different stuff, and it all kind of shifts around. But let's talk about some challenges. What are some of the challenges you've had over the years? Obviously, I'm sure you've failed many times, like all of us have. What are some of the ones that stick out? Some of the biggest challenges you face over time?
I think the challenges that I've typically faced are like growing the business, scaling, staffing, permit speed, the cost of construction, things like that. I mean, I remember a deal that I did. I just finished it actually. It was a new build that I just finished up in Clarington, and I bought this property in 2018 with the intention that it was going to be, tear the house down, sever the land, build 2 new duplexes, right? And I bought the property, everything was good, and then like not so long after that, the town brought in some new law called an interim control bylaw. And for anybody in the development space, that basically is a development freeze where they halt all building permits and development until they can figure out what the character of the neighborhood looks like. And then they'll open it back up so that you're conforming to that existing character of the neighborhood. And for me, I didn't really know what that meant until I went to get my permit. And they said, well, no, now you got to jump through a rezoning application hoop, and then you got to get the variance, and then you got to conform to different reports and studies and stuff like that to make sure that the architecture is within the confines of what we're looking to see. All of that took a couple of years. I had no idea that was coming down the pipe, like no idea. So fortunately, I bought right. I was still okay. The market's been very, very strong. The appraisal on the property came in fantastic. So, I had no complaints. In the end, the property still went really well. But dude, like in the meantime, I had tenants in the place. It was a bit of a fixer-upper house, but I just wanted to at least carry it. And like these tenants ripped the cabinets off the walls. I had the police there. The police said, oh, you know, they were a tenant, which means it's not vandalism, so we can't charge them. Like it was just, this is some of the stuff you don't hear about on Facebook and YouTube, and you know, but like that's reality. Sometimes stuff doesn't go your way, and you need to be able to navigate that and figure out, okay, what am I going to do if this goes south, and where do I fall? I think I got a poster on the back behind me. What's the upside potential and what's the downside risk? Right? That's how I weigh every deal, that arbitrage, you know, and say, is the upside potential worth more than the downside risk? Typically it is, and if not, I don't do it.
So let's talk about this one then. Why, when you found out that you had to jump through all these hoops, or it was going to be, you know, they probably didn't even know how long it was going to be before they had everything figured out. So it's sort of indefinitely up in the air. So what made you decide, okay, I'm going to weather the storm. I'm going to hang on to it. I'm going to wait until I get the answers, as opposed to just saying, okay, this one's not going to work. It's taking up too much of my time. Let's move on. Like there must have been a huge upside that you were looking forward to in order to hang on like that.
Yeah, there was. So, I mean, I could do the math. I could see the numbers. Obviously the appreciation is sort of speculative. It's been really strong in the GTA for the last number of years, which is great. But I knew that I wanted to do this as an early new construction project in my new construction career. And I said, the land is good. If I can at least be buoyant with the property, I'll take a risk and I'll take a gamble. And I was right. You know, it worked out. Now I got a nice piece of land that I can build on in the side yard, and a beautiful home that's now fully constructed and fully tenanted. And by the way, we're getting the best rents that I've ever heard of, at least in the Bowmanville market, at $2,055 per month for a 2-bed, 2-bath per unit. So just over $4,100 at the duplex. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. So did you end up tearing that original building down then? Is that what you did?
Yeah, we did. So it was an original farmhouse. It was funny when I was looking at the survey from, like, I don't know, late 1800s or something. It was a stone foundation. I was looking at the survey, and the lot was actually measured in chains, right? And a chain is actually 66 feet. So this lot was like 1.5 chains long, whereas now we use meters or feet. That's how they used to do land planning back in the day. Was they would just like go out and get a big chain, and they'd put a stick in the ground, and they'd swing the chain from lot to lot, and that was your piece of land. And this is how this was measured. So the farmhouse was like really, really old. It was done. It was finished, and it was time to go. So the best use in that case was just to take it down and split the land and start again.
Okay. I mean, there is all kinds of stuff that we can get into on this. So you mentioned that you put tenants in there until you were, had your answers and knew what you were going to be able to do with it. Now, is there, like, you're going to demolish the house, but now tenants have more, like, even when it comes to, how do you get them out? I guess.
Yeah. You have to set expectations on the way in. So in that case, I think I went through 2 sets of tenants in those 2 years, either through no pays or damage, or they just left. Like the guy that ripped the cabinets off the wall just left. So that was great. And I just left it vacant after that. I said, okay, I'm checking out. Like I'm done. I'll just eat whatever the carrying cost was, a couple $1,000 a month or something, and build this new place when I'm ready. But I mean, it's tough. You got to set expectations on the way in. I'm going into another deal right now in Durham where it's a very similar situation. House is there, taking the house down, building a couple low-rise apartment buildings. I'm building 5 or 6 next year, low-rise apartments, and in this case, this is 2. And you gotta make sure if you're going to put tenants in there, is that 6 months worth of carrying cost worth the risk of jeopardizing your development? And in the case of some of the bigger builders, the Mintos and the Tributes and the all these guys, it's not, right? Because they'll buy a farm, and like for the couple $1,000 a month that tenant may pay to live in that farmhouse, that could potentially hold up a multi-million-dollar development. So you really got to weigh the pros and cons. Like, is that $10,000 worth it, or is it not? And in some cases it's not. You just factor it in, and maybe you make a little less on the way out, but at least your timelines are still in perspective.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it does sound like you got lucky there on that one to sort of just say, okay, well, I think we've done what we need to do with the tenants. They've carried it for a while. Now we got a couple months. let's call it here and
Yeah.
sure that we can move on when we need to.
Yeah. And look, N11s are good, but they're only as good as the paper they're written on. I think the relationship is more important. So, I mean, when you put somebody in there, if you have this gut feeling that they're probably not going to go, well, maybe it's not worth it for you.
Yeah. I mean, I've used N11s before with the expectation, like they've signed an N11 at the same time as sorry, everybody, N11 is just a mutual agreement to end a tenancy at a certain date.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's what the form is
in Ontario. Yeah. In Ontario. Yeah.
So I've signed N11s with my lease agreements in order for them to move out. But you know what people have to understand is that those N11s signed with a lease, technically the tenants don't necessarily know this. Most of the time they don't know this, but they're not enforceable at the landlord tenant board. If that tenant decides to stay there, you know, if they're going to give you a hard time and say, you know what, I've got nowhere to go, I'm not leaving, I've decided I love it here and I'm staying forever, then you've got another problem on your hands.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it is just about sort of weighing out the pros and cons and making sure that you've taken everything into consideration of what things might hold you up and you know what, like I've been in the same situation and those people moved out because they don't know, they've agreed to move in under that agreement. So most time people are reasonable and they'll leave because they've already made arrangements to go at that certain time. But you just have to, I guess, make sure that you understand what's what when it comes to landlord tenant board. That can be tricky.
Ryan, you've done a lot of different types of deals over the years. Have you ever lost money on a deal?
The truthful answer is no.
Or has there been some really close calls, I guess?
There's been one or two close calls.
Yeah.
One or two close calls. The two that come to mind, one would be a bungalow that I bought. I overpaid on the way in. After I bought it, I knew I overpaid. And it was fine. I was going to flip it. And we were just going to like make a few bucks to break even, whatever. And we got close to liquidating the flip. And we got all the renovations done. And like 2 weeks before we went to list, the guy next door started like, it was a greenfield from an old factory. And they started ripping up like foundations and rebar and all kinds of stuff from this factory. I'm like, oh my God, we had piles of dirt and dust and it was a mess. Right out of the kitchen window, like people would look at this great big, it looked like somebody had ripped down a prison, right? So any potential buyer was like, absolutely not, I'm not living next to this for 5 years. So that killed that. I turned that into a great deal by building a coach house behind the property. I did a couple seminars out of that. We got great rents out of it. It turned out to be a really nice 2-unit home. And I still hold that property today. It cash flows really well. So that was kind of like a lemon to lemonade situation. And then number two was just like bad timing in 2017. I bought a property. The numbers were right. Everything was good. 2017 hit. The market fell a little bit. And I think I liquidated that property. I think I made like $5,000. You know, so I just got out alive on that. And of course, it took months and months to do the rentals and all that. But you know what? I didn't lose money. No complaints. Learned a ton. Kept the staff busy. Kept my reputation going, which was really important to me, more important than money or any of that stuff. I still did what I said I was going to do, and we still came out all right. So no complaints there.
What's the key then to doing that and never really making sure, you never lose money or never have a really, catastrophic deal that wipes you out?
Yeah. First thing is to know that it can happen really easily. It can happen just as quick as anything else. I mean, you got to remember that. Fortunately, like I'm 33, I haven't fully seen the downside of a really bad economy in my business career. So like 2008, I was still in college. 2000, I would have been like in grade 8 or something. I don't know. I would have been young. So like none of those things I really understood. So for me, I just always think back to, okay, if things go really, really not good here, really bad, what is the downside risk? And just know that bad things can happen. The second way that I hedge is buying equity. So on the way into a deal, if you can buy a house for 500 and it's worth 600, well, you got $100,000 worth of wiggle room there, and the market can soften quite a bit before you're negative. So those are two ways that I really consider all my deals.
So What about multiple exit strategies? Is that something like, are you prepared? Because you're doing a lot of stuff. You're doing a lot of flips. Is there the opportunity to hang on to these places if the market does turn?
Yeah. So I'm keeping more than I'm flipping, truthfully. I flip the odd one here or there, but I mean, I try to keep whatever I do. And in doing that, you do reap the benefits of long-term appreciation and cash flow and so on. But you do, negate a little bit of the downside risk as well, because if the market fell down next week and you were keeping that thing for 10 years anyways, maybe it won't affect you quite as much. So multiple exits are definitely important.
Now, again, we glaze over Ryan, you're glazing over all kinds of stuff here. So you mentioned a coach house.
Yes.
Let's talk and that's another thing that, from my understanding, that house, you weren't planning on putting a coach house there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You were planning on flipping that property.
Correct.
So tell us a bit about just how you came up with the idea and what kind of hoops you had to jump through in order to make that work and make it turn your lemons into lemonade.
Yeah, sure. So again, this was the highest and best use situation. I looked at the zoning. I think this one was about 2 or 3 years ago now. I looked at the zoning and I looked at the land and I looked at the actual house itself and I said, okay, what can I do with this thing? If I sell it, I was going to take a $90,000 loss, is what was going to happen. So that's real math. That's real money. And I didn't want to do that. So I sat on it for a couple of days. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do here? The basement was low, so I would typically put a basement apartment in or something and just carry it. But the basement had a low ceiling height. So I said, okay, with the low ceiling height, what can I do with this? I can underpin. Number one, what does that cost? I can jack the house up. Number two, put a basement apartment in. What does that cost? Right. Then I have to renovate. So what does that cost? And then finally, when I'm looking at the property after it's all done, what's the house worth? So that was option number one. Option two was obviously the loss. Option three was I noticed that I had a certain amount of frontage, but I had quite a bit more depth, more so than normal. So I said, well, what if I do something out the back? Because I've got excess land over there. What if I do something at the back and maybe I can make up my income and make up the loan to value on the property and make the actual resale value when I do sell it even better. And that's exactly what I did. So out the back, and for the sake of simplicity, we can just call it an addition, right? But I went to the city and I said, I'm looking to put a coach house in behind this place, just like the detached garage that was previously there. That's what I'm looking to do, and I want to make it living quarters. And they said, nope, you can't. And I said, why not? And they said, well, that's not in our bylaw. I said, well, let's get a variance. And they said, no, can't do that either. And I said, why not? And they said, well, we don't want that in our city. It's just not part of what we're after for intensification. Okay. So then I said, well, what if I build a house behind a house and connect it with a 3-foot hallway? And they said, oh yeah, that's fine. So that's what I did. I built a house behind a house, right? It was all off of common services. So, one water, one sewer connection that was split off inside the main dwelling. And then I did all the other traditional duplex stuff that people typically do. So 2 furnaces, 2 water meters, 2 hydro meters, 2 gas meters, like all that. And after I did that, I was getting great rents. I mean, I think at that time I was getting over $3,000 a month or $3,200 a month for a duplex in the city. And I mean, that at the time was probably 10% higher than most people were getting, truthfully, 10 to 15%. And the tenants that were there realized that what I had built was special because there's no sound transfer, no smell transfer. The use of the land was excellent, and the tenants were real happy giving their own living quarters and not having to live beneath any other family. So that's how I took that deal and said, okay, what can I do with this? And I got an appraisal recently. It was fantastic. So that's how I spun it around. And fortunately, I didn't take the $90K loss, but that could have very easily happened.
No, I was in where was that? That's Oshawa you're talking about?
That was Oshawa.
Have you looked? Have you been mainly in the same city or same location the whole time, or have you spread out a little bit over the last 6-7 years you've been doing this?
Yeah, I've spread out a bit. So I started in Oshawa. I moved up the 401 a little bit to Bowmanville, Clarington. So kind of that 401 corridor. And then I expanded out to the Quinte West Belleville market recently over the last couple of years, just because The yield, depending on what you're buying, you've got to be very selective, right? And the yield is very good when you go into what people would consider like B or C class markets that are more economical to purchase, but the rental yield is still the same. So the 401 corridor from Durham and East is typically where I focus.
Well, I mean, I guess this is the kind of stuff that people are going to learn with your book, right? Like, you cover all this stuff of, you know, is there like a list in there where they can kind of go, okay, what's the highest and best use? Maybe it's this, maybe it's this, maybe it's this. Like all that stuff's in there, and they sort of, and then of course they can get creative, I would imagine, on top of that.
The whole thing is about creativity. Yeah, the whole thing is about creativity. So there is a list in the traditional sense inside the book where I take a couple different deals and I evaluate them and I say, okay, if this is our zoning, if this is our financing, if this is our family situation, if this is our knowledge base, what would you do with this property? And I'm really big at, like, when I go and speak and stuff like that, I hate giving an "it depends" answer because too many people do that and it doesn't help anybody. You know, if you say it depends, well, they're like, okay, it depends on what? So I always quantify that with, you know, why does it depend and what does it depend on, and how can you make your decisions based on the situation that you're in? You know, so yeah, I definitely break that down in the book.
What type of, I'm imagining you have some pretty decent systems and stuff to, you know, you said you do 8 to 15 projects at any given time,
Yeah.
in that range. So how do you kind of structure all that? How does that work? How do you keep tabs on all that stuff? And what kind of systems have you created over the years?
Yeah, a lot of it stems down to delegation to the proper people. So we just had a team meeting last week with my staff. I run a really lean staff. So in terms of overhead, I'm a big believer in lean and efficiency rather than bloated and fat. For me, like, I run with a typical staff of 4 to 6 T4 payroll. And then we've got a lot of outside periphery. So like subcontractors, roofers, plumbers, electricians, land planners, things like this that help me as we navigate some of these challenges. So delegating off by way of CRM, by way of email, by way of my operations manager. Her name's Lev. You know, she's been really good at being traffic control for me because I'm looking for return on time. Like, ROI is great, but I mean, if you have no time, what good is that? So for 2021, that's going to be my big ticket: is what's my return on time on this project, and does it make money, and does it feed the family and stuff like that? So CRMs, email, all that stuff is good.
Ryan, I want to go back to the challenges for a minute because we've been talking a lot about highest and best use, and has there been a time where, like, for example, the one that you said, I want to build a coach house, and they said no. Has there been other times where zoning has gotten in the way of your idea of what you wanted to do, and you've been able to use creativity to overcome, like you did in that circumstance there?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, if you're going to build something, you might as well build something bigger than a single family home. Infill development's really good, but I mean, zoning is always a challenge. Like right now, this duplex that I just built, it was an R1 zone. They made me rezone it to an R2, which is still residential, which is ridiculous, but that's what they made me do. It took a year and thousands of dollars. But my highest and best use in the residential zone, because I couldn't go with an apartment building, was the vertical split. So I said, okay, I got a vertical split here. What are the rents going to be? You know, in the 2-unit space, the rents were phenomenal. There was a detached garage there as well. So I did a little bit of refacing and finishing on the garage. So in the residential space, you got to look at, okay, what's the coolest 2-unit property that I can build to comply with what I have to work with, right? And then when you get into the apartment building space, things like common laneways, rezoning, going vertical, more density, you know, varying the density that the city is allowing you to build with. So in a lot of cases in Oshawa, they're saying 85 units per hectare. Well, what if you can push that 10% to 95 units per hectare? That's an extra unit. And within that extra unit, what does that do to the value of the land on a per unit cost? Right. So those are all different levers and different dials that you can tweak in order to make that best use of land happen.
Has there ever been another time where you went in with an idea and they've said, no, you can't do what you want to do? Specifically, I don't think so. And I'm sure it's going to happen. I don't want to speak that into my life, but I mean, with development historically, it's a bit of a gamble.
When you go in saying, okay, I want this many units, and they say, well, we'll give you half. That's a problem. I try to do as much research on the way in. Like, I will over ask questions to municipal planners and to financing and to my staff and like everybody involved with the project. I will over ask before I pull the trigger. And I think in some capacities, that's probably held me back a little bit from the growth of the business because I'm a little bit more conservative. A lot of people think I'm aggressive, but I'm very conservative. It's probably held me back a little bit because I only want to do profitable deals. Like I don't want to gunsling and go do 30 deals and half of them turn out to be crappy. I'd rather do 15 and just say, okay, we're lean, we're efficient, we're safe, we're comfortable, and we're moving ahead. And one way, I was golfing the other day, and I realized while I was golfing that I hate to hit the ball past the pin and work my way back to the cup. I'd rather hit my ball short and work my way to the pin because I find that more motivating. And I think that same thing takes place in business. For me, I like to work my way to the goal rather than trying to backpedal.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess that says a lot, right? Like you don't want to go and buy something without doing the due diligence to know that you can do what you want to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Has there ever been a time where you were pleasantly surprised that you could do more than what you thought you could do?
Yeah, I'm working on a few deals right now that may pan out that way. Truthfully, when I bought it, I thought, okay, I can do X. And now that we're going through the process, there's different things, proximity to a downtown core, for example, that I didn't really know exist. I knew, but I didn't know. And they say, because you're close to the downtown core and a fringe zone, maybe we'll give you a little bit more density, which means a couple extra units. And what does that do to your pro forma, right? So yeah, some things take place like that where they're in your favor.
That's good. And I think that digging for it is the only way that you're going to come up with it. Like they're not going to seek you out and go, hey, Ryan, I noticed that you bought a property the other day. And yeah. I was thinking about it, while I was laying in bed last night, and I wanted to let you know that you could probably do more units if you pushed for that.
Yeah. Nobody does that.
Yeah.
Nobody does that. Like I just went through a deal, actually. I wanted to propose a larger building, 30 units or so. And the initial pre-consultation with the town was very favorable. So I was going to build a 30-unit building and maybe do rental, maybe do condo. I wasn't sure. But I own the property and I bought it, closed on it firm. I had a couple exit strategies, which were not development. But I mean, yeah, our initial phone call with the town, our initial meetings were great. And then our subsequent meetings were like, oh, no, you can't do that. I'm like, what do you mean I can't do that? You guys just told me I could do that. And they're like, yeah, we were wrong. I'm like, okay. Like, this is a 30-unit building. It's like mega $1 million project. Like, what do you mean? You're wrong. So stuff happens. Yeah.
That stuff's always tough. That stuff's always tough.
Yeah.
Hearing you get different inspectors in like that's a common one always, right? You get different inspectors saying different things or wanting different things, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
How do you work through that? That's tough.
It is tough. So I'm going to keep the property. Like I say, a couple extra strategies, but to bank that land on a major arterial road is huge. So I'm going to bank the land, and when the zoning becomes favorable, we'll go in again.
Do you find so when you say when the zoning becomes favorable, is it something that you sort of, become a squeaky wheel on and just keep sort of pushing your idea on them until finally until somebody on your team maybe goes, hey, what if we look at it this way? Is that the idea?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, intensification initiatives throughout the Golden Horseshoe, I think it's called the Greater Golden Horseshoe Growth Plan or something. It's basically a provincial mandate to say, okay, we need more people in our urban areas, so we reduce urban sprawl. We build vertical instead of horizontal. We don't want to go into the green belt. We want to keep everybody in cities, which means people support the restaurants, and it's just a better way to keep traffic to a minimum as well. So when we see a lot of these things taking place, typical government policy, that trickles down, and that ends up affecting land use. And truthfully, that's why basement apartments came to be, whatever it was, 5-10 years ago. How they became mandate legal, in most municipalities was because the government said, hey, we need people living in these places, and we don't want them traveling way out into the country because we can't service those lands. So let's keep them in town, right? Let's do some basement apartments, and let's intensify what we already have working for us. And I mean, I think the same thing is going to come through with triplexing. You're already seeing it, we'll say like west of Toronto, not so much out east. yet, but it's coming. Coach houses are coming, laneway houses are coming, triplexing is coming. It's the next step.
Let's dig into a few. Do you have something else there, Rob?
No, I mean, my stuff I just keep going down rabbit holes where Ryan will never get out of here. So we'll talk about coach houses next time, maybe.
Yeah, let's do it.
Maybe we should do another follow-up episode on that. Yeah, you're right. What about tips and advice you can give to some people starting out? Maybe they're just starting out in real estate investing in general, or maybe starting out trying to do some more creative stuff. What's some advice you give these people?
Yeah. When I first got started, I was listening to this guy called Eric Thomas, a hip hop preacher, and he was on YouTube. Have you guys heard of him?
I know him. Yeah.
Oh my God, the guy's great.
Thank God it's Monday.
Thank God it's Monday. Yeah, he's got his own podcast and the show. You guys can, or the listeners can check him out on YouTube. And he had this quote, very, very powerful. If you can find the clip on YouTube, and it went something to the effect of, if you want to succeed as bad as you want to breathe, then you'll be successful. And I thought, oh my God, that's pretty powerful. And that I think about that a lot. I also had a sticky note on my dashboard that says, how bad do you want it? And every day I would get in my truck, I would ask myself that. How bad do you want to spend time with your family? How bad do you want that next deal? How bad do you want to deal with that tenant? Or how bad do you want whatever it is that you want? Right. And I think the motivation and the mindset behind whatever it is you want to do is equally as important as the mechanics that it takes to actually get that thing done. So for me, I was always a big believer in just become a sponge, ask everybody for as much information as you can. And if they're willing to give it, make sure you accept it. Be willing to be wrong. I love being wrong. I'm usually on the giving end of a lot of these questions, doing podcasts and things like this. And I enjoy that, but I love to be wrong because that's how I grow, and you guys doing what you do with the podcast, look at all the information that you give out that people are graciously willing to accept. So for me, my biggest tip would be a sponge. That's your takeaway, and find a couple of quotes that motivate you.
That's really, really good. Yeah. You know what? We've said this time and time again, and I think that it's actually gotten through to a lot of people listening now, is that mindset plays a big role in your ability to be able to succeed in real estate, right? So where there's a will, there really is a way when it comes to this kind of stuff, especially starting out. You've got to be creative right from the start when you want to get into something like this. At least most of us do. I would say the majority, if not all of the guests that we've ever had on here in the 131 episodes that we've done now is that they started from just like a regular place. They're regular people. They weren't born with silver spoons. They didn't have trust funds. They're not just going, well, how did you succeed in real estate? Well, dad gave me money and I bought some houses. It's not like that, right? All these people have had to work. They've had to, carve their own path, but they've also leveraged the knowledge that all of these other people that they're around have given them and have been able to allow them to make less mistakes than they normally would. So that was my long-winded way of saying thank you, Ryan, for sharing all of this. I think there's a ton of advice that people can get out of it. How can people get in touch with you?
Yes, best way to get in touch with me would be sign up for the book at thehighestandbestuse.com. We'll put you on the mailing list. And when that comes out early spring, we'll give you a shout. And if you need me, info@rwcarinvestment.com.
Very, very good. Thanks, Ryan, man. We really appreciate this. And it's good to have you back. We waited too long, definitely.
Thanks.
5 years is long. Maybe we'll keep that a little tighter this time.
Cut it.
You got it. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
2.5 years. Okay, we'll see you in 2.5 years. We got to do the coach house episode. Let's get that in the next year at least.
Yeah,
sounds good. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's do it upon the book launch, maybe. Whenever that's. When did you say? Early spring 2021.
Spring 2021. Spring market.
Let's keep that in mind. Let's do something around that. That'll be fun.
All right, buddy. Thanks, guys.
Sandy, how can people get in touch with you?
Sandy at McKayRealtyNetwork.com would be easiest, or 289-389-6846.
And people can reach me at rob@mrbreakthrough.ca. Okay, well, thanks everybody. This has been a great episode, and hopefully you will tune in again next time. Have a great day.